Over the last month or so, Newcastle United have really kind of like dropped off quite a bit, and saying that this is a drop off is a tad bit of an understatement, to be honest, because they have just like fallen off, to be honest. It's like they've just fallen off a cliff somewhere and they're just not the team that they were really at the start of the season. However, they did actually have quite a tough start to the season, because by match week 5 they were all the way down in 12th place when they only had 2 wins out of their first 5 games, and 3 of these 5 losses were actually to, first of all, Manchester City, who reigning champions, then Liverpool, a top contending team, which a lot of people didn't actually expect Liverpool to be really that big contenders this year, and then one of, well, what you could call one of the bogey teams of the Premier League, one of the teams that cause a lot of teams problems, Brighton and Hove Albion. So really, those 3 losses aren't really bad losses, because they're 3 very good teams in the Premier League, and you might expect Newcastle to do a bit better in those 3 games, considering how much they've been hyped up and how many good players they've brought in. But they lost 3 of their first 5 games to those 3 teams. However, after this, Newcastle started really picking up some form, and when we went to match week 9, they had climbed all the way up to 6th place, and in doing this they had won 4 out of their last 5 games, and that other game they'd actually drew, so they didn't lose in those 5 games whatsoever. So they went on a bit of a winning run, and some of these wins were against Brentford, Sheffield United, Burnley and also Crystal Palace. So not like the most impressive wins, not a bunch of top teams, but it is they are a few wins, and it is a winning streak as well. So what you really need to do in a league like the Premier League, you need to go on winning streaks, because then that gets you the momentum, and it shows obviously that your team can win. And then when you go on that momentous run, it just kind of becomes a habit, and in a league like the Premier League you need to make winning a habit, especially when you're going into those big games, because you don't want to be used to falling behind. So when you play a team like Man City or Liverpool, if you're used to falling behind and then you just fall behind, it's very, very difficult to get back into that game, because Man City and Liverpool, when they go in front, they do not give up those leads very easily. So if you're used to going behind against the lower ranked teams, then obviously you're going to make your life very, very difficult when you go up against the higher ranked teams. So from here, they actually ended up keeping up some of their form as well, because they then went on to get wins against the then league leaders Arsenal. They also beat Man United and also Chelsea. So the win against Arsenal was a very, very good win. As I said, they were the then league leaders of the Premier League. So beating the top team in the Premier League is always a great win. And then they also went on to beat Man United, who at the time were actually playing quite well. Not so much anymore, but yeah, at the time they were playing quite well and looked like they could really challenge at least for a Champions League spot, maybe Europa League spot. And then they also went on to beat Chelsea as well. Not as much of an impressive win, because Chelsea are all over the place again this season. However, a win's a win. At this point, they were putting up a pretty good run of results, and it looked like they could at least challenge for a Champions League spot, along with, Arsenal, Man City and Aston Villa and Tottenham. However, since match week 15, this really has all just started going downhill for Newcastle. It really, really has not gone well for them, because since match week 15, they have gone on to lose 5 out of their last 6 games, which, even though they had a rough start to the season, that still isn't as bad as their start to the season, because at least they won 2 out of their 5. Here they've lost 5 out of 6, and some of these losses are to Luton and Nottingham. So these are 2 teams that Newcastle will be expected to beat, because Luton are in the relegation zone and Nottingham are really more or less close to the relegation zone. So you would expect Newcastle, whether it's home or away, to go and beat teams like that. So yeah, after that, they were just losing. I think they did also face Man City and Liverpool in this run again, but when you're losing to Luton and Nottingham, it's, you can't really expect yourself to beat Man City or Liverpool, because now you're on that kind of habit, or you've got into that habit of actually losing games against bad teams and you're going behind against them. So when it comes to Man City and Liverpool, yeah, it's going to be a struggle to beat them. So really, looking at their form, I looked at weeks 1 to 14 and weeks 15 to now 21. So when you're looking at weeks 1 to 14, Newcastle actually had a very, very good start to the season, even though once again they didn't have the best start to the season. They ended up winning 8 of their first 14, drawing 2 and losing 4. Yes, that's not the best record, but for Newcastle that is a very, very good record. And in these 14 games, they went on to score 32 goals, they conceded 14, and they had a goal difference of plus 18. So the one thing there that would worry me is the 1 goal conceded per game, because if you want to be a top team, you can't really be conceding on average a goal a game. However, it's not a dreadful record, conceding 1 goal a game and then scoring, I think it might be about 2.5 a game, is still a pretty good record. But then again, when you come up against teams like Man City, you're not going to score 2.5 goals a game against them, not usually anyway. But yeah, I think that is a very, very good record, even though the 14 goals in 14 games conceded. This actually had Newcastle up in 6th place on 26 points at this point. So 14 games into the season, you're nearly halfway through the season and you're in 6th place, just outside a Europa League spot, and not that far off a Champions League spot either. So really for Newcastle, this was a brilliant start. It wasn't the perfect start. The perfect start would have been to be in a Champions League place, but they did give themselves a good chance to really get another Champions League space. However, from weeks 15 to what is, at the time of recording this video, week 21, this has been an absolute disaster for them, because in these 7 games, they've won 1, drawn 0, and lost 6 in this time. And also in this time, they've scored 9 goals and conceded 18 with a -9 goal difference. So that goals per game has gone from what did I say, like 2.5 to just over 1 per game, and their goals conceded per game have gone from about 1 all the way up to I think that's gone up to 2.5. So that -9 goal difference as well. They're conceding a lot more now than they are scoring, and this really has had a big effect on their position in their season, because remember, they were 6th place in the Premier League. Now, after this dreadful run of form, Newcastle have dropped all the way to 10th place on just 29 points, and they are only 2 points behind Chelsea, who really have been a bit of a laughingstock the last couple of seasons because of their drop off. So Newcastle have gone from really challenging for the Champions League all the way down to below Chelsea. So to get a bit of a clearer picture of this, I wanted to look at their home and away form, and this really tells a really, really telling picture, because at home, Newcastle have played 11 games, they've won 8, drawn none, lost 3, they've scored 25 goals, conceded 10, and in their home form they've got 24 points. So in the Premier League, for their home form, they are actually 3rd. So they have really the 3rd best record at home in the Premier League, and that is incredibly telling, because that just reminds me of their form from weeks 1 to 14. 8 wins in 11. They're scoring a lot of goals at home, and they're really not conceding that much. They're picking up the points, so they're in 3rd place at home in the Premier League, which they've made their home stadium, St James's Park, an absolute fortress, which is what you need to do. So it's not really their home form that's the problem. Then we move on to their away form. They have played 10 games, won 1, drawn 2, lost 7. They've scored 16 goals, which isn't that bad to be honest. And they've conceded 22, only getting 5 points. And this puts them in 9th place for away form. This puts them in 19th place for away form in the Premier League. So that's really in the relegation zone when it comes to away football. So in 10 games, scoring 16 goals, I wouldn't say that's too bad, because what you've got to remember is playing away is very different to playing at home. They should probably score more considering how good they are, but it's the conceding 22 that's the problem. So really, I do think it's something defensively when they play away that is the issue. Their home form, at least for now, looks pretty damn good, to be honest. So I think it's something where Newcastle are just struggling, really struggling to play away. And I don't know if that's because a few of their new signings may not be used to maybe the atmosphere, or they're not gelling as well with the team, and that's just showing more when they play away. I don't really know. Newcastle's a bit of a weird one, because they do have a lot of very, very good, very, very talented players. It's just when they play away, they seem to really not be able to play well. They seem to not be able to put a game together, even against the lower ranked teams, this seems, which is very, very worrying for Newcastle, because they want to push to really at least at some point become title contenders, but you're not going to be able to be title contenders if your away form is down in 19th place in the Premier League. So that's kind of a bit of a dive into Newcastle's season so far. I've gone through multiple different factors, multiple different angles of this. So what do you think has caused Newcastle's drop off in the last month or so? Do you think it's a sign of things to come? Will this carry on for the rest of the season? Will Newcastle bounce back, or is it just a bit of a phase that Newcastle are going through? Let me know what you think down in the comments overall about Newcastle, their start to the season, their current form. Should Newcastle fans be worried as well? So yeah, if you like the video, drop a like. If you like the video as well, consider subscribing and maybe checking out some of my other videos on the channel, because I do a range of videos on this channel, so this isn't the only type of video I do. So yeah, thank you for listening to the video, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.